Powerful, influential, untouchable. But in reality, Ethan was a man haunted by loss. Ever since his wife, Olivia, had died in a tragic car accident, he had withdrawn from the world, shutting himself away in the massive mansion that now felt more like a prison than a home. The house, a grand structure of stone and glass, sat on the edge of the lake, hidden from the rest of the world by acres of dense forest. Its halls, once filled with laughter and warmth, now echoed only with the sound of his own footsteps. Olivia had always loved this place, calling it their sanctuary, but without her, it felt empty, hollow. That morning, Ethan had woken before dawn, restless as always. Sleep had become an enemy he couldn't conquer. He poured himself a cup of black coffee and stepped onto the balcony, inhaling the crisp air. The lake's surface was still, mirroring the sky above. It was peaceful, the kind of silence he had learned to embrace. But as he stood there, letting the morning unfold, something broke the tranquility. A sound, faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the rustling of leaves, carried through the mist. It was distant but unmistakable. A cry. Ethan stiffened. He set his coffee down and listened, his pulse quickening. There it was again, soft but urgent, like the sound of a newborn gasping for comfort. His brow furrowed. It couldn't be. No one ever came near his property, not with the heavy gates and security surrounding the estate. He moved quickly, descending the marble staircase and stepping outside. The cold air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed as he followed the sound, his heart pounding. The cries grew louder, leading him toward the edge of the lake. The mist curled around him, making it hard to see. His expensive loafers sank into the damp earth as he pushed through the tall grass. Then he saw them. 3 tiny bundles nestled in the grass near the water's edge. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Babies, 3 of them, wrapped in thin, frayed blankets, their tiny faces red from the cold. Their cries were weak now, as if exhaustion had stolen their strength. A rush of emotions crashed over him. Shock, confusion, anger. Who would do this? Who would leave helpless infants out in the cold like this? He glanced around, searching for any sign of the person responsible, but the forest was silent. The only movement was the gentle ripple of the lake. Kneeling, he hesitated before reaching out. His hands, steady in the world of business and power, trembled slightly as he lifted one of the babies. The child whimpered at the sudden warmth of his touch, pressing a tiny fist against his chest. Something inside Ethan cracked. Memories of Olivia flooded his mind. She had wanted children so badly. They had tried for years, but fate had other plans. And now, here he was, holding a child that had been left to die at his doorstep. He couldn't leave them here. Carefully, he scooped up all 3, cradling them against his chest as he hurried back toward the house. His mind raced. He needed help, someone who knew how to care for infants. His security team. No, they were trained for protection, not childcare. The house staff. They had been dismissed months ago when he had chosen isolation over company. As he stepped inside, warmth enveloped him, but it did little to calm his nerves. The babies needed medical attention, food, blankets, everything he wasn't prepared for. He moved swiftly to the living room, laying them down on the plush couch, wrapping them in a thick throw blanket to stop their shivering. He grabbed his phone, his fingers hovering over the screen. Who could he call? The police? No. If he involved them, the babies would be taken into the system, and he had no idea what kind of future awaited them there. He wasn't sure why, but the thought of them being sent away didn't sit right with him. He needed answers, and he needed to know who would abandon 3 innocent lives in the middle of nowhere. But before he could make the call, a noise outside made him freeze. A branch snapped. Someone was out there, watching. Ethan's breath hitched as he turned his head toward the sound outside. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, drowning out the soft whimpers of the babies resting on the couch. Someone was out there, watching. His sharp instincts, honed from years of surviving in a ruthless business world, kicked in. He grabbed the sleek black pistol from the drawer of the coffee table. A habit he had developed after Olivia's death left him feeling vulnerable. His mansion was secluded, secured by the highest-end surveillance and security teams money could buy. No one should have been able to step foot near his home without his knowledge. And yet, someone had. He moved silently, his footsteps soundless on the polished wooden floors as he made his way toward the front door. Every muscle in his body was tense. With one hand gripping the gun, he used the other to push open the heavy door just enough to peek outside. The mist still hung thick over the land, curling around the trees like ghostly fingers. Then he saw it, movement near the tree line. A shadow, barely visible in the dim morning light, slipping between the trees. Ethan's grip on the pistol tightened. His first instinct was to confront the intruder, but then he hesitated. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. 3 defenseless infants lay inside his home, their tiny chests rising and falling in exhausted sleep. If someone had abandoned them here, what if they had come back to finish what they started? Shutting the door quietly, he locked it and activated the reinforced security system. His estate was a fortress, but for the first time in his life, he didn't feel safe within its walls. His mind raced. He needed to get those babies checked out, make sure they were okay. But first, he had to make a decision. Should he call the police and report the intruder, or should he try to figure this out himself? Years of dealing with ruthless businessmen had taught Ethan one thing: never make a move without knowing all the angles. And right now, he didn't have enough information. Instead of calling the cops, he made another call. It rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Mr. Mercer." "Logan," Ethan said, keeping his voice low. "I need you at my estate. Now." Logan Brooks was his most trusted security consultant, an ex-military operative who had saved Ethan's life more than once. If there was anyone he could rely on, it was Logan. There was a pause before Logan asked, "What's going on?" "I found something. 3 abandoned babies near the lake, and someone is out there watching." Logan was silent for a moment. Then, in a voice that was suddenly alert and sharp, he said, "I'm on my way." Ethan ended the call and exhaled slowly. His hands still felt the warmth of the babies' fragile bodies. He turned and walked back to them, his heart clenching at the sight before him. The smallest one had curled into the crook of the blanket, their tiny hand gripping the fabric as if searching for comfort. The other 2 stirred slightly, their faces peaceful in sleep. Who were they? Where had they come from? And why had they been abandoned here, of all places? He noticed something then, something he had missed in the frantic moments after finding them. A small crumpled note was tucked into the edge of one of the blankets. Frowning, he carefully pulled it free and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. The ink smudged slightly from moisture, but the words were still clear. "Please keep them safe. Their lives are in danger. Trust no one." Ethan's stomach twisted. He read the note again, his mind churning. This wasn't just abandonment. Someone had left these children here for a reason. Someone had trusted that Ethan Mercer, of all people, could protect them. But from what? Or worse, from whom? Before he could process it further, a sharp noise rang through the house, loud and jarring. The security alarm. Someone had just triggered the perimeter. The blaring security alarm sent a jolt of adrenaline through Ethan's body. His grip on the crumpled note tightened as he spun toward the front door, instincts sharpened by years of dealing with high-stakes negotiations and ruthless enemies. But this wasn't a boardroom battle. This was real. This was life and death. The babies stirred at the loud sound, their tiny faces scrunching up in distress, soft whimpers rising in the otherwise silent house. Ethan moved quickly, shoving the note into his pocket before grabbing the remote control for the security system from the console table. He pressed a button, silencing the alarm, but his security cameras were already flashing red, motion detected at the east gate. Whoever was out there wasn't just watching anymore. They were trying to get in. Ethan pulled up the live feed on his phone. The high-definition footage flickered to life, showing the dense tree line beyond his estate's reinforced gates. At first, all he could see was mist curling through the branches, shadows shifting between patches of moonlight. Then a figure emerged from the fog, walking toward the gate with slow, deliberate steps. A man, tall, hooded, and moving with purpose. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Something about the way the man carried himself, calm, unhurried, sent a chill down his spine. He wasn't some lost traveler or a petty thief stumbling onto the wrong property. No, this man knew exactly where he was going. And that meant one thing. He was here for the babies. Ethan's jaw clenched. His instincts screamed at him to do something, but years of training his mind to think 10 steps ahead forced him to stay still. He needed to know what he was dealing with. If he made the wrong move, he could put those children in even greater danger. His phone vibrated in his hand. "Logan." "I see him," Ethan said the second he answered. "I'm 3 minutes out," Logan replied, his voice tight with urgency. "Don't engage. I repeat, do not engage." Ethan exhaled sharply. "What if he gets in before you get here?" "He won't," Logan assured him. "Your security system is top of the line. But if he's testing the perimeter, he's not here by accident." Ethan glanced back at the security feed. The man had reached the gate. He stood there, still as stone, staring directly into the camera. The way he held himself sent an eerie feeling crawling up Ethan's spine. There was no hesitation, no attempt to hide. Then, slowly, the man reached into his coat. Ethan tensed, his grip tightening on his pistol. His mind raced. Was he pulling out a weapon? A phone? A key to the gate? The man's hand emerged, holding a piece of paper, a second note. He raised it, pressing it against the camera. Ethan zoomed in, his pulse hammering as he read the words written in bold, jagged handwriting. "You've can't keep them safe." A rush of cold ran through Ethan's veins. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay composed. Whoever this man was, he knew about the babies. And worse, he believed Ethan wasn't capable of protecting them. Like hell, he wasn't. Ethan turned away from the security screen and strode back to the couch, where the babies lay nestled in blankets. They were completely unaware of the danger closing in around them, their tiny chests rising and falling peacefully. A fierce protectiveness rose in his chest. He had spent years distancing himself from people, locking his heart away after Olivia's death. He had convinced himself that emotions made a man weak, that attachment only led to pain. But now, looking at these 3 fragile lives, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. He didn't know where they had come from, or why they had been left at his doorstep. But he did know one thing. He wasn't going to let anything happen to them. Ethan grabbed his phone again and switched to the estate's speaker system. With a press of a button, his voice carried through the outdoor speakers. "You have 10 seconds to walk away," he said, his tone ice-cold. "After that, I won't be responsible for what happens next." The man at the gate didn't move. Ethan counted the seconds in his head. 1, 2, 3. Still, the man stood motionless. 4, 5, 6. Ethan's thumb hovered over the button to activate the emergency lockdown sequence. If the man made a move toward the gate, the system would trigger reinforced steel barriers, cutting off every possible entrance to the estate. 7, 8, 9. The man finally moved, but not away. Instead, he did something that sent a ripple of unease through Ethan's entire body. He raised his hand, pressed 2 fingers to his temple, and gave a slow, deliberate salute. Then, he turned and walked back into the mist, disappearing like a ghost. Ethan exhaled, barely realizing he had been holding his breath. His muscles remained tense, his mind reeling. A knock sounded at the back door. Ethan spun, gun raised. "Relax," came Logan's voice through the intercom. "It's me." Ethan let out a breath, lowering the pistol before unlocking the door. Logan stepped inside, his expression unreadable. He was built like a soldier because he had been one once, and his sharp eyes took in everything within seconds. His gaze flickered to the couch, where the babies lay sleeping, and then back to Ethan. "Tell me everything," Logan said. Ethan handed him the first note. Logan read it, his jaw tightening. Then Ethan pulled up the security footage and pointed to the second message. Logan's eyes darkened. Someone doesn't just leave a message like that unless they mean it. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Who the hell am I up against? Logan exhaled sharply. That's what we need to find out. But one thing's clear. Whoever they aren't done. Ethan's gaze drifted back to the babies, his jaw tightening with resolve. Whoever had abandoned them here had believed Ethan was their only hope. And whoever was after them believed Ethan was a fool for trying to protect them. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. Ethan stared at the security footage long after the hooded man had disappeared into the mist. Every instinct in his body screamed that this wasn't over. The deliberate movements, the ominous message. This wasn't a random event. It was a warning, a challenge. Logan stood beside him, arms crossed, his sharp gaze flicking between the screen and the babies sleeping soundly on the couch. His presence was steady, reliable, the kind of person Ethan knew could be trusted in the face of danger. "We need to find out who these kids belong to," Logan said finally, his voice low but firm. Ethan nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I thought about calling the police, but something tells me that's exactly what they want." Logan didn't argue. He had seen enough in his years of military and private security work to know when a situation was bigger than it appeared. Then we start digging. But first, we need to make sure this place is impenetrable. If they're watching, they're waiting for an opening. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I'll reinforce the estate's security, but I need you to do something else for me." Logan lifted a brow. "I want to know who that man is," Ethan said, nodding toward the frozen image on the screen. "Trace his movements, see if he left anything behind. If he's stupid enough to walk up to my gate and make threats, he's careless enough to leave a trail." Logan nodded. "I'll start now." He turned toward the door, but hesitated. "And Ethan, if this gets worse, you might not be able to handle it alone." Ethan clenched his jaw. "I can handle it." Logan didn't argue, but the look in his eyes said he wasn't convinced. As soon as the door shut behind Logan, Ethan let out a slow breath and turned back to the couch. The smallest of the babies stirred in their sleep, a tiny hand peeking out from the thick blanket. Something in Ethan's chest twisted. He had spent years avoiding attachment, shutting people out. He had told himself that it was safer that way, that emotions only led to weakness. And yet, here he was, his entire world shifting because of 3 abandoned children. He crouched beside them, careful not to wake them. Their faces were peaceful, unaware of the danger looming around them. Who were they? Who had left them here? And why had he, of all people, been chosen to protect them? His fingers brushed against the frayed fabric of the blanket, and something small and hard pressed against his palm. He frowned, carefully pulling the material aside. A locket. Ethan's breath caught. He lifted the delicate piece of jewelry, flipping it open. Inside was a tiny photo, worn and faded, but still clear enough to see. A woman. She had soft eyes, a gentle smile, and something about her seemed hauntingly familiar. Ethan's mind raced as he studied her face, trying to place where he had seen her before. Then his gaze dropped to the back of the locket, where an inscription was etched into the metal. "For my boys. Always." Ethan's stomach clenched. These babies weren't just random children abandoned by some stranger. They belonged to someone. Someone who had loved them enough to leave them with a message. And if they had been left here, it meant she had known she wouldn't be able to protect them herself. A sharp knock at the door sent Ethan jolting back to the present. His heart pounded as he set the locket down and grabbed his gun from the table. He moved cautiously, checking the security feed before opening the door a fraction. A woman stood there, her hair damp from the lingering mist, eyes wild with desperation. "Please," she gasped, looking over her shoulder as if she had been followed. "You have to help me." Ethan didn't move. "Who are you?" Her breath was ragged. "I don't have time to explain." Her gaze flickered past him, landing on the couch where the babies lay. Her eyes widened with something between relief and anguish. "They're alive." Ethan's grip on the door tightened. "You know them." The woman swallowed hard. "They're my sister's children." Something about the way she said it made Ethan's stomach sink. He stepped aside, allowing her in, but kept his gun within reach. She hesitated only for a second before rushing inside, closing the door behind her. Ethan watched as she took in the sight of the babies, her fingers shaking as she reached for them. The smallest one stirred, as if recognizing her touch. "You need to start talking," Ethan said, his voice firm. "Who left them here, and who's after them?" The woman turned, her eyes filled with something Ethan hadn't expected. Fear. She took a deep breath. "My sister, Ava. She was in trouble. She found something she wasn't supposed to, and when she tried to escape, they came after her." Her voice wavered. "She gave me the babies and told me to get them as far away as possible." Ethan's throat tightened. "Where is she now?" The woman's lips parted, but no words came out, because she already knew the answer. She was dead. Ethan inhaled sharply, his mind piecing things together. A woman on the run, a mother desperate enough to leave her children with a stranger. And now, a man at his gate, warning him that he couldn't keep them safe. He had been thrown into something dangerous, something bigger than he could have imagined. But it didn't matter. Because the moment those babies had been left in his care, their fight had become his fight. And whoever had killed their mother was about to learn exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. Ethan had always considered himself a man who thrived in control. He built his empire from nothing, conquered industries, and navigated power struggles like a grandmaster in chess. But now, as he stood in his secluded mansion, with 3 orphaned infants and a terrified woman looking at him for protection, he realized this was unlike anything he had ever faced. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension. The woman, Ava's sister, sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling as she gently touched one of the babies. Her name was Claire. And though exhaustion darkened the circles under her eyes, there was a fierce protectiveness in her posture. Ethan studied her carefully. Start from the beginning. Who was after Ava? Claire took a shaky breath. She worked in corporate law, but she uncovered something bad. She never told me the details, only that she had proof of illegal deals, trafficking, money laundering. When she tried to go to the authorities, they got to her first. Ethan's fists clenched. Who's they? Claire's eyes flickered toward him, and for the first time, he saw something beyond fear. Desperation. The same people who sent that man to your gate. Ethan exhaled slowly, piecing things together. Someone powerful had been willing to kill to keep Ava silent. And now, they wanted the babies too. Not out of mercy. Not out of concern. They wanted to erase any loose ends. Why didn't Ava come to me directly? Ethan asked. Why leave them on my doorstep? Claire hesitated. She wanted to, but she thought it would be too dangerous. You have enemies, Ethan. Ethan didn't deny it. He had spent years stepping on powerful toes in business, and he wasn't naive enough to believe that every deal he made ended with a handshake. But this was different. He rubbed his jaw. The note, you can't keep them safe. That was meant for me. They think I'm just another obstacle. His eyes darkened. They have no idea what they've walked into. Claire looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her gaze. You're really willing to risk everything for them? Ethan turned to the babies, his heart unexpectedly tightening. He had spent years avoiding attachments, building walls so high no one could climb over. But these children had shattered them in a matter of days. He met Claire's eyes, his voice unwavering. I don't lose battles. Before Claire could respond, Logan's voice crackled through the security system. Ethan, we have a problem. Ethan's muscles tensed. Talk to me. There's movement near the lake, Logan said. They're circling the property. 5 of them, maybe more. Ethan didn't hesitate. Lock down the estate. Already on it. Logan's tone darkened. This isn't a warning anymore. They're making their move. Ethan turned to Claire. Take the babies and go upstairs. There's a panic room at the end of the hall. It's biometric locked. No one gets in but me. Claire hesitated for only a second before nodding. She carefully lifted one baby into her arms, glancing at Ethan as if silently asking if she would see him again. He gave her a firm nod. Go, he ordered. As soon as she disappeared up the stairs, Ethan moved to the gun cabinet. He had never been one for unnecessary violence, but he had learned long ago that the world didn't play fair. He grabbed a Glock, a spare magazine, and a tactical knife before heading toward the control room where Logan was stationed. Logan barely looked up from the monitors. They're good. Tactical. These aren't common thugs. Ethan watched the screens. The men in the footage were dressed in dark clothing, moving in calculated patterns. They had military precision. These are professionals, Ethan murmured. Hired guns. Logan's jaw tightened. They'll have night vision, suppressors, thermal tracking. We have the advantage on defense. But if they get inside, they won't. Ethan's tone was like steel. Logan gave him a knowing look. This won't end tonight. You know that, right? If we get rid of these guys, more will come. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then we send a message. Logan smirked. That's what I like to hear. The estate fell into eerie silence. No gunshots. No yelling. Just the sound of the wind shifting through the trees. Then, a light flickered on the screen. One of the tripwires had been triggered. Ethan's grip tightened on his gun. He turned to Logan. Let's show them what a mistake they've made. The night was eerily still, the kind of silence that came before a storm. Ethan moved through the dimly lit hallway with the quiet precision of a predator. Every step was calculated, every movement controlled. The weight of the gun in his hand was steady, familiar. He had been in high-stakes situations before. Boardroom wars, ruthless negotiations, corporate betrayals. But nothing had ever felt as personal as this. These men had come for the babies. They had come to finish what they started with Ova. And they had made the grave mistake of thinking Ethan Carter was just another rich man who would cower in fear. A soft beep in his earpiece. Logan's voice followed. They're moving in. West entrance. 2 at the door, 3 flanking the windows. 1 near the lake, keeping lookout. Ethan's mind worked fast. Take the lookout first. Do it quietly. A moment later, the radio crackled. Done. Ethan almost smirked. Logan had always been efficient. He pressed against the cold marble wall near the west entrance, his breath slow and measured. Through the security feed on his phone, he watched as one of the men picked the lock, the other keeping guard. Amateurs. They thought they were dealing with civilians. Ethan moved swiftly. The moment the door creaked open, he struck, an elbow to the throat of the first man, a sharp twist of the wrist to disarm him. Before the second could react, Ethan drove his fist into his ribs, knocking the wind from his lungs. The man staggered, reaching for his weapon, but Ethan was faster. He delivered a brutal kick to his knee, sending him crashing down. Logan's voice came through again. 3 left. They know something's wrong. Ethan wiped a smudge of blood off his knuckles. Let them come. The estate was built like a fortress. Even if these men got inside, they wouldn't get far. And they definitely wouldn't make it out. Another beep. Logan again. They're switching tactics. They're moving toward the panic room. Ethan's blood turned ice cold. Claire. The babies. He didn't hesitate. He sprinted down the hallway, every muscle in his body burning with adrenaline. He had to reach them before the men did. Gunfire echoed through the estate. A bullet slammed into the wall near his shoulder. Ethan ducked, rolling behind a marble column. He could hear them now. 3 voices, communicating in clipped, efficient words. 2 down. Target is moving. Secure the kids. Rage boiled in Ethan's veins. These weren't just assassins. They were mercenaries, hired professionals. And that meant someone with money and power had sent them. He exhaled, forcing his body to remain calm. Panic wouldn't help. He had to be smarter, faster. One of the men stepped into view, his rifle raised. Ethan didn't give him a chance to react. He fired, a single shot, clean and precise. The man dropped instantly. The second mercenary turned, but Logan appeared behind him like a ghost, a blade flashing in the dim light. The man crumpled before he could make a sound. Ethan didn't stop moving. He reached the panic room door just as the final mercenary was planting a charge. Too late. The small explosion sent a wave of heat and pressure down the hallway. The door didn't break. It was reinforced steel, but the force had left a dent. And worse, it had thrown Claire off her feet inside. She was screaming. The babies were crying. Ethan saw red. The last mercenary turned, gun raised, but Ethan was already there. He knocked the weapon aside and drove his fist into the man's jaw. The mercenary stumbled, but Ethan didn't give him time to recover. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it until bones cracked, and yanked him forward into a brutal knee strike to the gut. The mercenary gasped, eyes wide with pain, but Ethan wasn't finished. He slammed the man's head against the steel door, once, twice, until the body went limp. Silence. The only sound left was the rapid beat of Ethan's heart. He took a shaky breath, then turned to the panic room. He pressed his palm against the biometric scanner, and the door hissed open. Claire was on the ground, holding the babies tightly, her face pale with terror. Ethan knelt beside her. "It's over," he said, his voice softer now. She looked up at him, eyes filled with unshed tears. For now, she was right. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Ethan stood, turning to Logan, who was wiping blood off his knife. "We need to find out who sent them." Logan nodded, already working on it. Ethan looked down at the 3 children, small, fragile, innocent. Whoever had ordered their deaths had underestimated one thing. Ethan Carter didn't just fight battles. He won them. And now he had a war to finish.